So Test for Echo was released in 95, 96, and the next record, which would be Vapor Trails, was released in '02. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, and after ZZ Top were able to rehabilitate and come back to the 90s with two super explosive records like Antenna and Rhythmine, they were able to ruin that for themselves with Triple X with 30. So let's go back to the new millennium, 2003. Sees ZZ Top release Mescalero, which I don't even know if it means anything in Spanish or in Texican, whatever it is, the language that they speak there, but it's probably denotes something very hot. So this is a step in the right direction, but not enough. So it's a good sounding record. The sound is kind of not super heavy, but much grittier, much more natural, much more guttural than previously than Triple X. The songs are good. Of course, the big song here is Alligator, and there's a couple more. Mescalero, the opening song is not bad. They have a couple duds. They actually have a tendency. It's not the first time they do. Liquor is a bad song. It's kind of just very repetitive and a little too slow and going nowhere. And they have another one. I forget right now the title, but they have one or two duds on the record. But they have Butt Naked, which is a good one. Like I told you, Alligator. So a kind of a return to form, but not yet enough. They need a little bit of push, which thankfully they got, and they did with La Futura. So La Futura is a very heavy and fuzzy record, maybe a little bit even too much, maybe lacking a little bit of that natural raw edge or natural electric kind of fuzz, like this like a fuzz box, a little effect induced fuzz, but nonetheless heavy, fuzzy, guttural, kind of Rio Grande mud almost, not that natural, but very good record. So finally in the 2000s they were able to release a record that redeemed, in my opinion, their silliness and the silly mistakes of the past. But again, the flip side of the coin, that those stupid mistakes made them huge MTV stars, right? So Headache in Blue, Chartreuse is again Got to Get Paid, the opener. Not a bad album by a long shot. Not their best, but I think that it makes up for most of what they did on to that point. So let's go back to icy, snowy Canada with Thor the Snow Dog or something like that. And so, like I said, after the big pause, after the big tragedies of Neil, they released Vapor Trails. And when Vapor Trails came out, and of course there was the big hullabaloo about Rush, they came back to New York City. They sold out Radio City Hall in a matter of minutes. I don't know, that's when Ticketmaster was pretty new, and that was the whole controversy with the scalpers. People bought tons of tickets and they sold them at the entrance at the jacked up prices. And there was legislation. I'm not sure if it was federal or just New York State, but there was some legislation about curtailing the wholesale buying up of tickets and then jacking up the prices. But be this it may, as far as the music goes, when I first saw the album cover, I'm like, God Almighty, what is it? Just please tell me they didn't make a grunge album. And thankfully they didn't. Maybe there is a little bit of a hint or a nod towards that, but this is kind of like Roll the Bones and counterparts on steroids. On one hand, it's even more stripped down, and I don't know what the right descriptor is. Light, not in the sense of light versus heavy, but not that it's not dense, it's not packed with all kinds of many things at once. Like you can hear the melodies, you can hear the guitars, you can hear the vocal lines. Everything is very airy and open, and yet it's not simplistic. So it's not really a rehash of counterparts and roll the bones, but it have that airiness and that easiness, that softness to it. This is definitely a slow listener, kind of like I said, the dim delight. Listen to it. It's well worth a listen. It's kind of a good record, but it definitely takes some time to get into it. The follow up to this, Snakes and Arrows, is another one that, from my perspective, is kind of a dud. It's more electric, it's more live, it's more edgy than Vapor Trails. It loses that openness. It's a little bit more packed. There's more rushier music here, more intense ideas and intense music. And yet for me, this record just doesn't work. I never liked it, and I tried. I listened to it many times, but to me, it just doesn't stick. I think it's even worse than Permanent Waves. Not in a bad way. They don't really have any bad record, but when you listen to Rush, you instinctively compare it to the best of Rush, to the greatest of Rush. This one is two hands down, doesn't belong there. Malignant Narcissism, okay, Working Them Angels, Far Cry, it's okay, it's listenable, but it's like a Rush that's not rushy enough, doesn't belong anywhere. I don't know. I was never able to really connect to this record and really get too much into it. Not a bad listen, but it is what it is. And then 2012 comes their final record, Clockwork Angels, and I think with Clockwork Angels they were able to rehabilitate themselves. Clockwork Angels, I would think, should work to pretty much any Rush fan. Again, this is not the classic Rush from the 70s, but it definitely has some nods and pointers to that direction. So it's pretty much some components of almost any Rush era. The most comparable album, which I think would be somewhere like a Moving Pictures meets Test for Echo meets Hemispheres, kind of, sort of. So here the complexity and the packing a lot into the songs doesn't jump at you that much. You get to hear, so it does definitely has that natural kind of feel that I think that they started to work on since Roll the Bones, and it sounds to me like the ideas already came in Hold Your Fire and Presto. So they try to keep it simple, keep it natural, keep it sort of light and flowing. They did have this, and yet they put a little bit of the edge and the claw that you can hear in Caress of Steel, that you can have in Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures. Like I told you, it does have that smoothness and that a little bit of synthness of Test for Echo. So all in all, not a bad record at all. Halo Effect is one that I like a lot. So is The Anarchist, the title song, Clockwork Angels. It's just a good record, and in my opinion, it takes a good amount of time of getting into. And after this, the band still toured and worked together, but unfortunately, Neil was already very sick, or becoming sick, and a few years later, he unfortunately passed on from brain cancer. What a history! What a life! He went young, but he lived longer than most people with his creations and his drum patterns and his lyrics. Again, you don't have to agree with everything he said. Obviously, he took a certain slant to many of his lyrics. I'm not a fan of lyrics like Subdivisions. I mean, complaining on how good you have it. Someone complaining because your parents want you to be a doctor or an engineer. but again, that was his perspective. So anyway, great band, great, very accomplished musicians. Great contrast to ZZ Top, which kind of keep it raw and hard and simple all of the time, most of the time, except when they were trying to play games and trying to be what they're not to be. That didn't work to in ZZ Top's favors. So let's do what you all are waiting for, and like I promised you at the end of the Kiss video, we're gonna do the ranking of all four bands. So we're gonna do ZZ Top, Rush, Kiss, and AC/DC. So on to the ranking. Okay, so how are we doing this? I think I'm gonna go in, not in chronological order, in order of what I think is my preference in the bands themselves. So I'm gonna start with Rush, and I am going to tell you the list as I, again, these are generals. I think it would be more fair, or even more realistic, to cut it down into levels or tiers, if you will, like 4, 5, 3, I don't know what, six levels, just ranking them one on top of the other, because it changes a lot, and the next time you listen to it or think about it, it comes. But in general terms, this is what it is. So my all-time favorite, and two hands down, which I never had any doubts in it, and it was pretty much always like this for Rush, is Grace Under Pressure. Next up, I'm gonna go with Text for Echo. Hemispheres is definitely a big no-brainer here. I'm gonna put here Power Windows from the prog era. Like I told you, I got Hemispheres. After Hemispheres, you can rank it any which way. You could put Farewell to Kings, you put 2112, but I think that I like Caress of Steel because it has that young and rough aggression that they had in the first two records, but this time they really channeled it good, and they made it good. They made it sound good, and it's also very proggy, like Those Who Come. So after Hemispheres and Power Windows, I'm going to go with Caress of Steel, Farewell to Kings, 2112. Again, I think these choices won't surprise anyone. Next up, Presto. This is probably not a super popular choice, but to me, I love Presto and that whole era very much. And yes, I do place Presto over Signals, even though it's not like a clear-cut and obvious choice and a big step up. So pretty close, but again, Signals. Moving Pictures comes in at this point. I would put between Roll the Bones and Counterparts. It's kind of they keep flipping because none of them are like a huge favorite. This is kind of like we're going into the second half, but I could say Roll the Bones here. But again, if you want to switch it out with Counterparts, that's possible. So Counterparts, Roll the Bones. Vapor Trails from the newer ones. I think this is a very, very special and smooth and gentle record. It kind of reflects a little bit the status of the situation or the state of mind that Neil was, but it doesn't come out as a complaining or a whining or a depressive record at all. But does have some sweet melancholy to it. I'm gonna put Clockwork Angels here because I do like that record, even though it took some time to get into it and get on me. Then Permanent Waves, and then the last three, those that I don't really like: Snakes and Arrows, Fly By Night, and Rush itself. So this much for Rush. And from Canada, we are going to go all the way to Australia to our friends AC/DC. How do you rank 17 records that sound just the same, right? Well, there are some differences and some standouts and some exceptions, right? So anyway, number one for me for AC/DC, that was always kind of my favorite, is Flick of the Switch. These huge, big, crunching riffs like Rising Power that they just go on forever, and the embossed, the album cover, which like when I was a kid, I was like, it's cool, but what is it, right? It's a guy who's a miniature guy who's jumping on a giant guitar to flick the switch. Anyway, so flick of the switch, then of course Highway to Hell and Power Age. These two you can switch out between them because they're very close to one another. But I would put Highway to Hell a little bit above Power Age. The Razor's Edge, that one is amazing. That's an incredible one. I would go with Back in Black at this point. I would put Fly on the Wall. I know it's a weird choice for a lot of people, but I always love this record, even though it's kind of weird. And it was in a period when AC/DC wasn't really looked at, but they just went on and didn't look left or right. They just went straight ahead, right? From the newer ones, I put here Rock or Bust, believe it or not. That's a very, very good record. And from the newer era, the post mid 90s or post 2000s, hands down the best. It's a hard, rocky, crunchy, almost kind of harkening back to Flick of the Switch. So Rock or Bust, Blow Up Your Video, another one from the 80s that a lot of people just forget about, and it's a great, very worthy. I think that all of the 80s were kind of Back in Black based, but with their own personality, except for Those About to Rock, which we're gonna mention later on. So anyway, Blow Up Your Video. I think the one from 2020, Power Up, is like a very AC/DC-ish, back to the school days kind of like. They also try to kind of go back to the future, go build on their very early records, but with the modern technology and the modern expectation of power and heaviness. Dirty Deeds Done Too Cheap. So now we're going kind of the lower tier, the pre Let There Be Rock. I'm sorry, Let There Be Rock is definitely above those. So I said Power Up, Let There Be Rock. Black Ice, this is one of the lesser good ones from the newer ones. Dirty Deeds Done Too Cheap. Yeah, Dirty Deeds Done Too Cheap. You could say that it's better than Black Ice. Let's do Dirty Deeds Done Too Cheap. Black Ice, Stiff Upper Lip, also not of the best ones. Ball Breaker, definitely the least good of the modern ones, and then the first ones that were just not up to par. You know, they were teenagers and get kind of figuring out their sounds. So TNT, High Voltage, and Last and Yes Least for Those About to Rock. Sorry for those of you who are big fans of this record. I don't really like it. Not in the top AC/DC catalog, but they're all enjoyable, all worth a spin from time to time. Order of preference: should we do Kiss or ZZ Top? Let's do ZZ Top. Okay, so I'm gonna go with all-time favorite, either Rhythm or Antenna. Antenna was like very dear to my heart when I bought it. So Rhythm was kind of expected or wanted, desired when I went to get that. When I said I want to hear if they were able to top Antenna, and I think they were. So I'm gonna go Rhythm number 1 and Antenna number 1.1, right? just a little hair above Antenna, but I think that overall the sound they were able to do a real modern day Rio Grande Mud sound without sounding fake, while making it sound natural and raw and instinctive and good and not forced, right? Next up, I'm going to go with Rio Grande Mud. I think you're not surprised if you watch the beginning. I'm going to go with Tejas. Has kind of like a modernized sound, yet staying true to their roots and being very much what it is. Again, the next ones are no-brainers, DeGallo and El Loco and Fandango. I'm going to put La Futura here. Maybe it's a little bit too high, but I think it deserves to be ranked this high. And then I'm going to those that I like less, kinda. I'm gonna go with Recycler from 1990, then ZZ Top's first album, Tres Hombres, Mescalero, Triple X, and then Eliminator and Afterburner, which they botched, unfortunately. So this much for ZZ Top, like a real fun and good band to listen to, but they definitely had their shares of mistakes. So before I going on to Kiss, and okay, I covered kind of the Gene versus Ace, all of that nonsense. I think, like I said, I'm not going. Before I go into to Kiss, I want to just mention that ZZ Top are touring again as ZZ Top, and to me, this is just not right. It's disgraceful. Dusty's gone. Close the band and go home, just like Rush did, just like Motorhead did. The guy is gone. He's 6 feet under. Don't tour. You want to do one-off joint appearances, make another name, make it Frank Beard and Billy Gibbons with whatever the new guy's name is. He used to be Dusty Hill's guitar tech. If I understand correctly, Dusty Hill kind of wanted that if he ever can't make it, he would replace him. But it doesn't matter. Close the band. Don't tour anymore under the name ZZ Top, and be a straightforward human being. Be a match, right? That's what Rush does. That's what Motorhead does. That's what all bands that are really decent. And before you go into Kiss, so what's the difference between Ace and Peter? Ace and Peter didn't die. They're still around. They still make a mint just off of the royalties of the early Kiss songs. So that they're still living like kings. They can get dead drunk and get stoned, and they don't have to work a day for them. And they had more than their fair share. That's also what I wanted to say in the beginning, in the Gene versus Ace and Peter. You can hate Gene and Paul all you want, but they were the ones who soldiered on through the mistakes, through the stupid thing. It doesn't matter how many bad or indecent or cheesy or dishonest things they did, they kept the band together. And Ace and Peter had any chance that they wanted to be professionals, to be true musicians, not to sabotage the band, not to stop playing drums in the middle of the concert, not to refuse to load the vans when they were poor and they were just starting out. And then when they let them back in the 90s, again, they started the fight. They didn't like the fact that they were hired guns, but that's what they were, and they made, I promise you, more than you and I. So they made decent money only when they saw how successful the tour was, for which there was no guarantee, certainly not in grunge country, in grunge era, right? Mid to late 90s. No one really foresaw that it's going to be that successful and that big, including Gene and Ace. So that's why they put them on a salary and they paid them. So again, when they started to make the money and the fame and the fortune got to their heads, again, they hit the bottle and the snort and the coke. So it's on them. You know, you can say whatever you want on Paul and Gene. I'm not contesting that. They definitely have big egos. Gene is a cocky, arrogant guy. Sometimes I want to punch him in the face. No question about it. But the fact of the matter is that they worked their asses off from day one to day Z, to the last day, until they decided to finally call it quits and make the final true, real, absolute, truly real, really real. This time really making a real farewell tour that will not have any more farewell tours after it. So, ranking the albums by Kiss, again, I know some people will agree with some of it, some people won't, but this is my preferred list. Number one, Hotter Than Hell. This is a record in a league on its own. So you got Hotter Than Hell, and then the rest of Kiss. I think that they were never able to really top this album. All-time favorite Kiss album, no questions asked, and I don't think I ever wavered with it. If yes, maybe in the very beginning when I was hearing some new Kiss record, but then slowly Hotter Than Hell started coming back. Second, I'm gonna go with the first record, Kiss. Then of course Destroyer, that's kind of a no-brainer. Revenge from 1990 or 91 or 92, very, very good. The band kind of reinvented and rehabilitated themselves. Great record, not classic Kiss by any stretch of the word, but Kiss. And that's the first one with Eric Singer, the new drummer who's still in the band, and just a very, very strong, good Kiss style heavy metal, kind of borderline hard rock heavy metal. So they were very smart with it. They didn't make it thrash, they didn't chase the fans, they just did a modernized 90s true Kiss record. Okay, I'm gonna go with Creatures. I love that record very much. I'm gonna go afterwards with Lick It Up, both with Vinnie Vincent. Excellent records, really, really excellent. I'm gonna put here live records because with Kiss, I think that there's enough of a justification to rank live records. But again, if someone doesn't agree with me, just close your ears for a couple of seconds, and I'm gonna mention a live one because it's a significant live recording. I'm gonna go here with Asylum. I know it's a weird choice, but it's a heavy, hard-hitting record. And when you think Asylum, all of a sudden, Revenge is not such a big surprise. So Revenge is a big surprise if you jumped over all of the 80s or if you lost interest after Lick It Up. So if people who heard Animalize lost interest in Kiss, they kind of, I could definitely understand it, right? Then Sonic Boom, of all of these bands, I think maybe even Rush, I think that Kiss were the ones who were able to make records in the 2000s that were a true follow-up or a true equivalent, let's just say, of what they did in the early 70s, without sounding fake, with sounding genuine and straightforward, and yet hearkening to the time and being also rooted in the present. So of all the bands, even more than AC/DC, definitely more than ZZ Top, and I think even more than Rush, they were the ones who were able. So Sonic Boom is gets the two thumbs up. Same with Monster, like I told you in the videos, they kind of pretty close to one and all, but to one another. Then I'm going to go with another classic from the 70s, Rock and Roll Over. But this is like, just say, the second half, more or less, of the Kiss discography. Rock and Roll Over, Love Gone, they're very similar, very close to one another. I'm gonna go with Animalize, which is, it has Mark St. John, but it's not as bad as people think. I think it's worth a spin, especially after these decades. After Lick It Up, it was kind of a deception. And then Psycho Circus, again, you could easily reverse these. It's not etched in stone. This one, I would go with Dress to Kill. Some of you may claim that it should rank much higher and go kind of next to Destroyer maybe, or at least a little bit higher. I kind of hear you, but it was like they were kind of pussifying themselves at a time that they shouldn't. They should have gone with their hard edge. I think this record had potential, but because they commercialized it, it didn't sound as good as it could have. After Dress to Kill, I have to mention Hot in the Shade. Again, we're going into the really lower, the last rung or the last tier, if you will. Dynasty, as much as shit as that record gets, it's not really terrible. So I like funk, I like disco if it's done in a good and tasteful way. They didn't that much, but that per se doesn't bother me so much. Like the cheesiness and the pandering around it, that takes away from it. So Dynasty. Then of course you have The Elder, the music from the what's it called, the soundtrack for the non-existing movie that was completely botched and too many ideas, overworked. They didn't know what they were doing really. Then I'm gonna go with Unmasked, Crazy Night, and Carnival of Pukes, which I really don't even consider a real Kiss album. Shame on Eugene for ramming that one through and trying to pander to the grunge crowd. And of course it would never work, because the whole idea of grunge is just to spit on these classic bands and to spit on a working class. I say working class in quote marks, kind of the working bands, the dirty bands, let's just say, the bands that are not super sophisticated, like David Grohl and Kurt Cobain, who are cool and have these haircuts from the 2000s and they're super modern and they know how to fold the New York Times and read the Atlantic, all that fakery. I can't stand it. So anyway, let's end on a positive note. 4 bands that are super famous and super cool, and Rush is like a serious, iconic band. Everybody respects them. AC/DC, right? On one hand, they're kind of childish and juvenile, and they make simple music, but it's so good. It's razor sharp, and you could say very similar things about ZZ Top, their bluesy stuff, and then of course you have Kiss with their flamboyant style, kind of starting the avalanche, the snowball, and what would become known as hair metal, the makeup, and all of the madness. So all in all, 4 great bands. Thank you for all the years and all the music, and thank you for all of you who have listened all the way up till here. And so until the next time, rock on and on and on and on.